Hey, what's up guys? So in this video, we're gonna go over all of the new and recently updated radar detectors. Now I've got a lot to talk about and share with you guys, including some stuff I haven't yet shared on this channel that I think you guys are gonna really like. Now, the last time I did this video was back in April of 2024, and a lot of stuff has happened since. We've got a lot of updates to existing radar detectors that we're all using. We've got some new radar detectors that have been announced that have some new features that we haven't seen in any other radar detector before. There's also been some leaks for some upcoming kind of upgraded versions of some existing popular detectors as well, that again I haven't shared with you guys yet on this channel, that we're going to go ahead and take a look at here. And so in this video, let's just go ahead and start running through the highlights here of basically all the latest stuff that's coming out, and of course all the stuff that's come out over the past few months. Now, before we start diving into things, a heads up about October 8th and October 9th. The Amazon Prime Big Deals Day sale is coming up. This is one of those big Prime Day sales that we see throughout the year, where traditionally we see some of the biggest discounts on different countermeasures, including both radar detectors and on dash cams. Usually we see a lot more discounts on dash cams than we do on radar detectors, but either way, for October 8th and 9th, I'll be posting some information as far as the best deals that I see for different countermeasures, the ones that are actually good. There's going to be a lot of sales for a ton of stuff, and I kind of want to just focus in on some of the very best ones for you guys. I'm going to be posting all the information over my website, and then I'll also have a YouTube video as well that kind of summarizes some of the best deals that I see as well. Now, diving into maybe some of the biggest updates and changes over the past, half a year since April. Maybe the most notable thing to talk about is the unfortunate passing of Mike Valentine, the man who started Valentine One, the radar detector company. He was definitely a pioneer in the industry, and he passed away recently. I've done a video actually kind of going over that, kind of like a tribute to him, sharing a little bit about his history. I did want to mention that after I'd shot the video, I actually got a message from the very first employee at Cincinnati Microwave. We got to talking, and he actually told me that some of the history that I shared was incorrect. And I actually posted a correction over on the forums, as well as in the video description of that video, that helps to clarify some of what actually happened. Furthermore, we've been in some discussion as far as actually sitting down and doing an interview where he can share his firsthand accounts of the development of the company, the prototypes, the history, kind of what actually went on behind the scenes. Much better information than any of us have been able to glean as far as what happened a long time ago before I was even born, and just kind of what's been posted online. So let me know if you guys would like to see that interview. That's definitely something that I would be interested in learning more about and sharing with you guys. Now, as far as the updates for the V1 Gen 2, we've got firmware version 4.1035. This is the early September 2024 upgrade, and it's got a number of nice new improvements. First of all, there's going to be some improved blind spot filtering, definitely a welcome change to get fewer false alerts. They've also added a special BSM Plus feature, which is kind of like Valentine's take on K-blocks or K-notches, but a little bit more sophisticated. The idea is when you're running the detector in all bogeys mode, which is kind of like the one that gives you the most amount of false alerts, they can take the individual frequency ranges where you're going to be seeing most of the blind spot falses and giving you some additional filtering just in those small specific frequency ranges. It's basically taking the additional filtering for the advanced logic mode, the big L mode, and applying it to just the small sections of K-band when you're running the detector in all bogeys mode to give you kind of better performance across most of K-band, but then additional filtering as needed for the small frequency ranges where blind spot falses traditionally transmit. Then they've also added new options for things like a silent startup, or the ability to keep most of the display off at idle, so the detector is going to be more hidden and stealthy. And they made some audio improvements as well when you're running the detector with the third-party app to help make sure that you can hear the alerts more quickly once the detector starts transmitting, or I guess starts alerting. But either way, for more information about that, as well as everything else that I talk about throughout this video, I'm going to have links down in the video description to more information, to the change logs, to the discussions on the forums, to links where you can purchase the detectors, etc. So more information about everything that I talk about will be linked down below. Next, moving on to Uniden, we've got a lot of updates for a bunch of different detectors. Starting off first with the Uniden R3, we've got firmware version 1.63. This is going to be adding things like GATSO support, one of the photo radar guns, and it's going to be adding a Mazda CX-5 K-block as well, basically giving you some additional filtering for the Mazda CX-5s without having to resort to turning on MRCD, which can then add some additional false alerts, and then you have to add some additional filtering for the MRCD falses that you introduce. So I think the K-block is going to be a better solution. Then they released firmware version 1.65, which kind of tweaks that Mazda CX-5 K-block, making it a little bit narrower and less risky to use, which was definitely a welcome change. And then also as far as the red light cameras, there was sometimes an issue where like, if you have a red light camera, it's gonna have like a GPS radius around that red light camera location. And if you're like on the edge of that radius, just sitting in a parking lot or something, you can get a little GPS drift and it can look like you're, even if you're stationary, you're like going towards the red light camera and away and towards and away and towards and away. So you could be getting these like repeated red light camera alerts just sitting in a parking lot, which can be kind of annoying. And so for that reason, with their latest firmware, they basically set it up so when you're driving under 5 kilometers per hour, it's no longer going to be giving you those red light camera alerts. Once you resume driving, like you're actually driving towards a red light camera or something, then yes, in those instances, you will get the alerts like normal. Moving on to the Uniden R7, we're now up to firmware version 1.51. And if you guys remember version 1.47 that was temporarily made available, it added some additional like GPS lockout features and whatnot, but it had a bug where people were getting GPS errors. And for that reason, it was actually pulled from Uniden's website. Well, 1.51 introduces the fixes necessary so that you can have like the GPS lockout improvements without having those GPS errors. They've also added that Mazda CX-5 K-block that we got for the R3. They've added detection of the laser Atlanta when it's set to its stealth mode, kind of its primitive anti-jamming capabilities, and the detector can now display stealth on screen if you get shot with that gun. They've also made another change to the K-blocks where they changed like where you can set the direction as far as where it's going to be filtering signals from. If you want both front and rear, instead of displaying side arrows, it can now display like front and rear arrows to make it clear that it's going to be affecting both directions, not just the side signals. And then those additional auto lockout features that were added to 1.47, they've actually removed the ability to customize those individual settings, and then they've kind of like preset all the different settings for us, which is kind of nice so that we don't have to go in and like figure out what the best settings are. They've just kind of assigned those settings to improve the auto lockout functionality. And then finally, that red light camera change that I mentioned in the R3, where it's going to be filtering out red light cameras when you're traveling at low speeds, they added that to the R7 as well. And then finally, there's a couple other minor things like the K-block levels can be set to change based on if you're running the detector in highway or city mode. And things like the auto mute menu option, it's now kind of built into the auto mute alert level. So they just kind of modified how the settings are structured in the R7. And then when it comes to the custom firmwares for the R7 that's being developed by Mitheru down in New Zealand, I still actually prefer his version on the R7. That's what I've been running basically full time in one of my cars. It's got a lot of improvements that we have that Uniden's kind of like been catching up on, but it does some of these things better, and it adds some additional features that I like. One of the most notable ones is the ability to automatically change the sensitivity of the detector based on speed. That's a feature that we've got in the stock R8 firmware that's not available on the R7, but if you get his third-party paid firmware, you can add it to the R7 as well, and it makes it a more well-rounded, more feature-rich detector. Then for the custom installed Uniden R9, they've updated it to version 1.28, and this is a very minor firmware update. It's mostly just going to be some bug fixes in the detector. The Uniden R4 and R8 actually haven't been updated in a while. I was hoping to see some of these same firmware updates that we've had for like the R3 and the R7, like the K-notches or the K-blocks for the Mazda CX-5s, for example. That's a very useful feature. They've added it to the R3 and the R7, but we still don't have it for the R4 and the R8, and so we've kind of been reliant on the apps to add that additional filtering, but you would kind of expect maybe their flagships would really be the ones that they're going to like focus on here. Now that said, it looks like there's actually going to be newer versions of these detectors coming out. There's been some information leaked from the FCC about the R4W and the R8W. It looks like they're basically going to be updated versions of the R4 and the R8, but they're going to be adding Wi-Fi capabilities, which is what the W means, maybe Wi-Fi or wireless. It looks like it's going to be similar to Escort's radar detectors that have C in the name for connected detectors. It's basically going to be the wireless version. Now, we don't have a ton of information available yet about this. However, SEMA is going to be coming up, and Uniden's going to be there at the show, and it's very possible that they're going to be officially announcing and introducing these new detectors. And so for more information about those, if they wind up actually releasing it, I'm definitely going to be at the show. We'll take a look and ask them about that. So definitely subscribe to get notified for when we have some information finally available as far as these new detectors, what the new features are going to be, what the benefits are of having Wi-Fi available in these detectors, etc. Additionally, for those of you who want a Uniden detector but don't want to pay full price, Uniden just launched a section on their website for factory certified copies of their detectors. These detectors are priced less than brand new, and the pricing is often cheaper than what you see on Amazon as well. Other times the price on Amazon is going to be cheaper, even brand new, and so down in the description I'll put links to both new and certified so that you can compare and choose which one's better. And then when being certified by Uniden, they come with a 90-day warranty. In fact, the R7 that I run in my car is a factory certified copy, and it's basically like new. Next, let's take a look at the Redenso DS1. That just recently got a firmware update as well. It's been updated to version 1.17. However, there's no changelog that's been posted online. I emailed Redenso asking for some information as far as what this update includes, but I haven't heard back. So there's an update that's available. Great. I have no idea if it's new features or bug fixes or performance changes or anything like that. We've been asking on the forums. Nobody else has heard anything either. If you guys know, let me know down in the comment area or post on the forums. I'll have a link to the discussion area for that, just like everything else. But yeah, there's an update available for the DS1 as well. Switching gears, let's take a look at Escort. First up, let's start with the Max 4. This was updated to firmware version 1.2, and this update includes some improvements to the K-band response time, as well as some blind spot filtering improvements. And doing some testing, it looks like the response time is actually pretty reasonable here with this update, though I did have some issues with it failing to reliably alert to the Stalker 2 on Ka-band. But as for the K-band results, which is what this update is focused on, the results varied from one gun model to another, and personally I'm happy to see that Escort is continuing to work on this. Furthermore, there's also an update coming for Escort's higher-end Blackfin DSP detectors, and these updates should have a number of different improvements, including improved response time. I'll have a separate video going over all these different updates, as well as testing these improvements too. Then moving on to Stinger, they've released multiple firmware updates. The latest version is 7.0.32, and across these different updates, we've had things like improvements to the radar alerting, improved filtering on the radar side, and then just some additional improvements and bug fixes and whatnot as well. Next, let's take a look at a new detector from Genevo. Now, I don't typically cover Genevo because, well, they're based overseas. They sell detectors internationally that they don't sell here in the US because we have different radar guns, different needs, different filtering characteristics, different laws. Like a lot of the stuff that applies here in North America doesn't necessarily apply overseas and vice versa. However, there's something really interesting that they're releasing. It's a new detector called the Genevo Guard 77. And what's new about it is it can actually detect radar in the W band, kind of 75 to 110 gigahertz. And they're introducing this capability because they've got some new radar guns overseas that transmit at 77 gigahertz, higher than Ka band. Additionally, because there's a lot of cars that transmit at 77 gigahertz, not just 24 gigahertz or K-band, they've also added some blind spot filtering that's going to be necessary at 77 gigahertz as well. I don't know if this is necessarily something that we would need here in North America as well, or if 77 gigahertz is going to show up here too. It's possible, but either way, a lot of this kind of stuff tends to show up first overseas and then eventually kind of makes its way here stateside. We've seen that with a lot of the other photo radar stuff, like the multi-radars, for example. And so, yeah, that's another thing that companies are working on too. Now, moving on to the laser side, let's start here first with anti-laser priority. They've released an updated CPU. It's the Hardware 6 CPU. It's a pretty minor update compared to Hardware 4, and there's things like a better DSP chip, they've added more memory, they've improved the self-test functionality, etc. It's also going to be only compatible with some of the newer versions of the different heads. So for example, some of the regular heads are going to be more sensitive than some of the ones they shipped years ago. And so it's only going to be compatible with the newer versions of the regular heads that have been shipping for a while. Additionally, when it comes to the TX heads, it's not going to be compatible with the older green and blue TX heads. It's only going to be compatible with the newest black TX heads. Now, personally, I was hoping to see more innovation from ALP with a new CPU upgrade, especially considering a lot of the new features that are being introduced by the competition. Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, improved apps, all this kind of stuff. Maybe modifications on like how the ports are designed to avoid some of the annoyances when you're running things like Bluetooth and a control pad and a speaker all on one port, because not all of them are going to work properly. So they could have added like a headphone jack or just put Bluetooth like built into the CPU, which would help save on cost. Like, there's a lot of discussion that's kind of been going on in the forums of like why they might have done this or they might not. I'm glad to see some improvements, but I definitely would have loved to see more. And then on the software side, they've recently released a new firmware version, 6.1.3, and this basically just offers some bug fixes here that they've seen when they first released the Hardware 6 CPU. It's not specifically a performance-related upgrade, but BRD has mentioned that some of the fixes could also help improve performance. And to help test and verify this, there's actually a big laser jammer meetup in Tennessee coming up. I'll actually be there to help with testing, to learn about the jammers, and to share some of the results with you guys. So you can stay tuned for more on the laser jamming testing side as well. Then when it comes to Escort, they've recently released the ZR6 laser jammers. Now these use the same smaller laser jammers that Escort uses in the Redline CI 360C, their custom installed radar detector and laser jammer. However, the ZR6 is going to be available standalone, so you don't need the kind of Redline CI to use it. You can run it all by itself. Or you have the option to integrate it with a windshield mount radar detector as well and use your windshield mount radar detector as the controller and display and to adjust settings and whatnot for your laser jammer. And then finally, we've got the Blinder HP905 Ultra. Haven't heard from Blinder from a while. They actually sell laser jammers to Escort. And speaking of which, the new ZR6s or the Escort Redline CI jammers that I just mentioned with the smaller heads, those are actually manufactured by Blinder and being sold here in North America. Now, Blinder's actually releasing their own kind of like standalone version of these laser jammers that are only going to be available overseas. They're called the HP 905 Ultras. Again, they've got the same style heads and whatnot, these smaller heads. However, the UI is going to be very different. Instead of actually running any cables into the firewall for your controller and speaker or to plug into a radar detector or anything, these are actually going to be wireless. And the idea is that they're going to be connecting to your phone, for example, and your phone inside the car will be your controller, your display, your speakers, like all that kind of stuff. So the installation is going to be easier. Again, this isn't going to be available here in North America. It's only available overseas. Escort, they're going to be selling kind of the North American version with their own spin on it. There's also some other cool stuff as well, like Escort used to have the ZW5, for example, the wireless laser jammers. They're really best to just kind of run up at the front of the car, because if you wanted to run it to the rear, you had to drill through the firewall to run the cars to the back of the car, which kind of defeated the purpose of having a wireless laser jammer. With the Blinder ones, for example, they thought of a solution to this, and so instead of actually having to go through the car, you can actually go underneath the car. They're specifically designed to handle the water, the heat, the dirt, all the kind of stuff that would be encountered when you're outside the car. So for the sake of like easier installation, instead of having to go like through body panels and through the car's firewall, you can actually just run it underneath the car, which is a cool change to help simplify the installation, especially when you're going for something that's wireless. I've got an article over my website that kind of goes over my thoughts on that laser jammer that you can check out too. Again, just like everything else, I'm going to have a bunch more links down in the video description for you guys that goes over additional details and discussion for all of the different countermeasures that we talk about. So with that said, yeah, that's a look as far as all the latest updates and new detectors and stuff to come that we have to share already. So definitely stay tuned. There's a lot more stuff going to be coming, and I'm excited to share that with you guys as well. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys are doing great, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.